Before I call upon our next panel, a reminder that you can engage with this panel using Slido. So if you want to ask a question, please scan the QR code and pop it in. Spell check, because sometimes they're on the screen, and there was an incident once and it was pretty embarrassing. Okay, so to help us unpack if we are finally ready to properly embrace transit-orientated development as a catalyst for smart growth, I'd like to call our panellists to the stage. Simone Dyer, General Manager, Mixed Use Origination, Stockland. Rebecca Pinkstone, CEO, Bridge Housing. Jacqueline Vozzo, President, UDIA, New South Wales. Alex Wendler, CEO, Landcom. And Provocateur, Larry McGrath, General Manager, New South Wales and ACT, McConnell Dowell. Please make them welcome.
All right. G'day everyone. My name's Larry McGrath. Great to be up here, and we are going to unpack, we've heard this morning from Minister Halen about the transport task, and she's also touched on housing. We've just heard from Kirsten on the planning task, and again around housing. And we're going to bring those together and talk about TODs on this panel, which is fantastic. I'd like to start as well just by acknowledging country, and just say how fantastic it is, when you drive into Sydney Olympic Park, when you see those 4 massive billboards that say always was, always will be. So just again, pay my respects to country and any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people in the room today. Great to hear Kirsten talking just then about the balance between greenfield and infill, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. But as I think everyone acknowledged, we haven't been historically great at this. What is transit-oriented development? Ultimately it's a planning framework where we bring together public transport and we co-locate it with jobs, with services, and of course with housing. And I think if we're really going to tackle the task that's ahead of us, we need to understand why we haven't been successful in the past. We've built housing in areas, quite significant density in areas far away from heavy rail. And we've built heavy rail and then we haven't filled it in with any kind of infill. We still have many heavy rail stations around Sydney where you walk out of the station and there you go, there's some quarter-acre blocks. So there's a big opportunity for us, but lots of challenges as well. But if we are going to give it a red-hot go, we need to understand why it hasn't worked. And maybe, Simone, if I could start with you, you're at the front line of delivering the housing task in this city and in this state. It'd be great to hear that from you. Why haven't we made this work, and what are the lessons that we can learn?
In my mind, I think TODs are a very complex matter to solve. And when you think about the sort of priority precincts that were announced around transit nodes, for instance, St Leonard's, the Hills, Sydenham to Bankstown, those sorts of announcements happened 6, 7, 8 years ago. And the reason why they are so slow to progress is because they are such a complex challenge and require long-term planning, strategy, vision to unlock those opportunities. So I think the momentum that I see at the moment in the sector and the market, in industry, in the department is really encouraging, because there is a lot of dialogue between government agencies, the private sector, institutional capital, to try and solve some of these challenges that we haven't been able to solve in the past.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we're talking about 75,000 homes a year, but unless I'm mistaken, we're not going to hit that this year. So we've got to keep ramping it up further and further. Alex, you're CEO of Landcom. Kirsten's just talked about, the huge role that you're going to play in this. What do you make of the challenge, and how are you preparing to actually tackle this?
Thanks, Larry. But can I just add to the question before? Yeah. Because I think there are two important aspects why it hasn't worked in the past and what we have to change. And the first one is that the planning system and as well transport were working for totally different goals. That they were working in a different world, and you know quite well from your previous life about business cases, right? Like if you want to get a transport business case up, you need to have a travel time savings. That's the one thing that makes the money flow. And as well, if the only thing that is really captured in these is possibly some land value change, but the important aspect that we're looking for now of really unlocking housing and having all these social aspects to it, that is very difficult to capture. And that's why there were two different worlds. So it's very good to hear what Kirsten said, that there is now this new approach, and we just need to see that this new approach is more than just the relationship between the two departments, but then going into the heart of it as well and seeing other technical hurdles still in regards of how investment money flows. And I think the other part as well of why it hasn't worked in the past and why we now have a shot at it is because of the different way of how we look at density. You know, at least the start of how we can see that there's political leadership about density, and the conversation is a different one than it was even a year ago. And that is really something that is hopefully different, and most likely we'll talk more about it as well. But if you talk about Landcom, I think the good thing about this is that we have now consensus. We have support, political support, for us to increase our role. So what we are doing is we have received more capital. We have as well received priorities that grow our focus, or that widen our focus. We are now active in the regions. We have been around as an organization for 47 years, but for the first time we now are really focusing on problematic parts of the regions, particularly the northern rivers. And we as well are now widening our skill set and just being more than a land developer if we need to be. And where we all see the market dislocation at the moment, and we now are building up the skill set as well of delivering build form where needed. And Kirsten was mentioning build to rent as an asset class, as a growing asset class, and we are developing pilots in the regions where the private sector is currently not at. And maybe to finish, sorry, it's really our role is the unlocking and working with the industry that Jacqueline represents, and others here, and the CHP sector as well. Our role is to really make sure we bring them in and work with them in partnership.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. And look, I might bring you in, Jacqueline, on this as well. Just again, that question of, what can we learn from the past and where we haven't made it work? And also, do you think we have the right structures in place now to actually make it happen?
So I'll probably take the second part of that question first, the right structures in place. As we heard, it's hard. TODs, looking at them moving forward, are really, really hard. From what I understand, of the 3 metro lines currently under construction, there are 33 stations, and only 10 of those have broader strategic plans associated with them, 6 of which refer to increase in housing density. If we're going to hit these targets in terms of our quotas in terms of supply, all 33 stations need strategic plans. All 33 stations need an uplift in density, together with other things. It's not just TOD developments, but all of that together is going to assist. When you talk about what we need to be bold, I guess, is the part of the question I really want to focus on too. Perhaps it's a different structure from before. Perhaps it's a state-owned corporation. We heard from Kirsten how energised they were in terms of approvals, planning, but also on the delivery side. Maybe there's a state-owned corporation type of solution that can consolidate the land holdings around TODs, that can bring it all together and act really swiftly, efficiently with industry to get those TODs precincts moving quicker, sooner. With the caveat, it will take the right decision makers in that state-owned corporation or in that particular authority to get it moving. But I think we need to be bold in our solutions to try and make this work and bring that density to market around TODs.
Yep, and it seems like a great time for that boldness. I mean, I think there's a real willingness for it, isn't there? Look, Beck, I might bring you in. There's a question from my good friend Anonymous, who says, how will TODs ensure they contribute to social equity and affordable housing goals? I mean, do we run the risk here of, if we're not really pushing this in the TODs that we're actually going to build around, our public transport networks, do we actually run the risk of not bringing that full benefit to low and middle income households and not maximising the actual opportunity that we have in front of us.
I mean, I will say I agree with the TODs. The complexity necessitates an intervention from the state because it is very complicated, and I think how we think around planning in those locations is really important. But there's an opportunity here, and Alex has talked about it in Landcom. We're talking for the first time about inclusive cities. And part of the inclusion in cities is around the diversity of housing supply and the people who are living there. And so from a community housing provider perspective, affordable and social housing is our bread and butter. And we really firmly believe as an industry, and I think a lot of the research that we're seeing internationally in cities is that you need to start looking at TODs and how you're including social and affordable housing in that uplift from the start. So I think in terms of being brave and bold, we need to be talking about some really clear targets for social and affordable housing in those developments, because we need to make sure that the key workers, the workers that drove our city during COVID, can afford to live where they work. And that's going to be a fundamental part of an inclusive city as we move forward, and particularly for Western Sydney.
Simone, do you have a view on that?
I couldn't agree with Beck more, honestly. Where these complicated urban renewal precincts or TOD precincts exist, it's essential that affordable and social housing, in my mind, is prioritised. We talk a lot about the 75,000 dwellings a year from the Housing Accord, but we also need to remember the 57,000 applications on the social housing waiting list. So having environments and places and communities where all people can prosper it's got to be front of mind. So embedding principles around inclusion into our strategic planning frameworks, in my mind, is a no-brainer. It creates a level playing field for everyone in a competitive environment, but also in a community environment. So, yeah, couldn't agree with Beck's comments more.
And Jacqueline, do you want to chime in on that one as well?
I'm not sure I can add any more to what we've just heard.
Yeah, okay, all right, good. So one thing I did want to pick up on is Minister Halen this morning, she was talking up buses a lot. And I think when we think about TODs, we naturally go to railway stations. Do you think we actually need to think more broadly around them as well? And, can a high-frequency bus network with bus lanes and proper interchanges and everything, can that actually support the level of development that we need and maybe give us even more diversity of housing when we're not talking about, real skyscrapers of train stations, but we are talking about that increase in density? Open to maybe you, Alex.
I'm happy to start with that. I think when we talk about density, we need to look as well at what the hurdles are. We talked about the community, but as well, another hurdle that we have is actually the car dependence that we have. Because you have to build, like if you make it denser, you need to find a place for all these cars. And then the biggest hurdle that we can see on our developments is then that the road network suffers and we can't go higher. So there is actually a limit to the density, which is quite interesting, because what you want to get is to break through this. So therefore, the solution is not just having one metro station, but the solution is that that particular area is well serviced into all different directions, right? So therefore, I think, yes, there is more than just the metro. There is as well, let's make sure that these new stations that actually have a new function now, that the travel is different now after COVID than before. Right? Because the function of the stations has changed. It's not only that people want to go to the station to go to work and come back late at night. There are lots of different kind of trips that make these TODs so interesting and mean as well that they should become the new town centers and have this all the amenity that Kirsten was talking about and that you mentioned here as well. And for that, you need to then as well allow to, okay, it's not just jumping there to go to Martin Place, if you're in Bella Vista, but as well take that bus you're talking about or whatever other light rail, if ever, and then you go somewhere else. That is very key. So yes, let's, going back to, I think Kirsten said it, the minister said it, let's invest in public transport because only then we can achieve the density that we need and then we can solve the problems that they're talking about.
I mean, I would agree. When you look at mandatory inclusionary zoning in the UK, you're talking in transport, in TODs, you're looking at 20% targets. Paris is 20 to 25%. Some of the excellent social and affordable housing developments have actually been on top of bus interchanges in Europe. There is great potential to broaden out what we're looking at, not to only look at metros, but to look at some of those locations with very big interchanges that could have potential change of use, recognising that some areas, for example, we're in Western Sydney, but on the northern beaches are only serviced by bus. And so we really need to be looking at different ways of thinking about the development in different locations across Western Sydney as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, there's a question that's sort of picking up on that theme a bit, which I think from Ben Hendricks, excuse me, there's a bit of an echo here, which is that lack of enabling infrastructure is a key issue slowing TODs. As the mega project spend comes off the boil, should local infrastructure be more of a focus to deliver housing? Maybe one for either Simone or Jacqueline?
I think the short point is everything is going up in cost. You know, whether it's the mega projects, whether it's the small little upgrades to roads, whether it's, building a park as part of a bigger project, costs are increasing everywhere. I think with mega projects particularly, maybe slowing with those cost increases, we now need to be really strategic about where we spend that money. And I think it's just going to start becoming a priority list of what are we going to get the most benefit out of by putting the money here first, and then we sort of work back from there. I might just say one thing in relation to the previous question as well. We are trying to create walkable, connected cities for both play and work. We are trying to reduce dependency on private vehicles. That then brings the full gamut of transport into play. Buses, metros, trackless trams, anything else which comes online that we can think about. In 50 years' time, cars, the way we drive them now, are going to be a thing of the past. And I think when it comes to transport and building around these future transport nodes and current transport nodes, that needs to be in the back of our heads. We can't always retrospectively try and retrofit for the future. We need to start thinking about where the future is and what decisions are we making now in relation to all of that planning, whether it be transport, whether it be our strategic plans, etc., on how we sort of solve some of those solutions up front.
Yep. Alex, I might just come to you on something. You mentioned business cases earlier. So, and do we sometimes think about these things in the reverse when, we look at transport business cases? If we're actually fully embracing TODs, are we actually going to get to a point where, we can think about, well, more residents around these stations, more employment around these stations mean more customers to these stations, means more passengers on our transport system. Do we actually, if we properly embrace this, can we actually end up with far better business cases for our transport projects and a more compelling case to invest more in public transport?
Yeah, but this still requires to rethink about how we value things in the business case. Because if you look at a typical metro business case, the ridership is not really what drives it. It's the travel time saving for them. And the reason why we've been building so many roads in the past is because the biggest value you get is saving lives, which is a great thing, but it's just the dollar value attributed to it. So it's all in the fine print somewhere in a treasury guideline that really nobody looks at. And so I think, yes, there's a new way, and that's the reason why I'm saying this sitting on stage, right? We just need to have a look at all these different things that have been hurdles in the past.
Yep.
And yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And another question, which has got the most votes at the moment, do DA processes need to change to fast-track TOD development, and how? Maybe one for you, Simone.
I probably have more experience in large precinct renewal than individual DAs, but what I would say is that we do need to move into a more strategic discussion around planning of precincts, particularly around transport and enabling infrastructure, because the multi-layered approach to how we unlock opportunity and supply is really onerous from a development perspective. In state significant precincts, there's local councils, there's the department, there's government architects, there's community, there's the needs of, you know, the development industry to make precincts work. There's many stakeholders in that discussion, and I look forward to, in, you know, the coming period, having more of an open dialogue with each of those stakeholders and able to fast track some of these processes, because, you know, we're all well intended. And we want the right outcomes, because, you know, the development industry, who are all sitting in here today, we're all here with the same objective, which is to assist in unlocking supply. And we are all committed to design excellence, better planning, equity, inclusion. So I know that was a long way of answering the question, but I think we do need to just unravel a little bit, create a simpler process, and we'll come a long way. You know, going back to that point about enabling infrastructure just before, just to talk about scale, and perhaps this can assist Secretary Fishburn with her problem, is that, you know, Stockland have a 68,000 lot pipeline, and that's just in land. In modular housing land lease communities, we've got a pipeline of 10,000 dwellings that are in various stages of planning, but infrastructure is often the bigger problem than planning. So having those type of strategic discussions to unlock 80,000 dwellings as a part of this ambition is a discussion that certainly Stockland looks forward to.
Yeah, and really turning our infrastructure pipeline back to focus on the housing task rather than necessarily the other way around, right? Do you pick on that, Alex?
I just want to give a quick stat just about the DAs, and it's not to pick on anyone, but the Metro Northwest has opened in 2019. The first residential buildings will only open next year. I think Bridges is managing some of them. And in Bella Vista and Kellyville, the DAs will only be ready in 25. So we can see that something has not been working with the DA processes. So we have to go through all the stages that you were saying before, and the infrastructure has been there, and but that just shows us how big the task is.
I feel like I have to bring you in on that.
I'd agree. I think that we've talked about today how we think about the delays, and particularly I think in the context of social and affordable housing, because they're subsidised housing. They require a subsidy to be built. You can't have social and affordable housing without a subsidy. It might be land, it might be cash, but there needs to be a subsidy. So when you start thinking about planning and DAs and design competitions, every single element of that is time delay and cost. And it really makes projects difficult to stack up if we don't have some change around that. So I think there's been some excellent announcements around how planning will work for social and affordable housing to unlock to meet the targets that we've been talking about. And I think some of those reforms could be broader so that we could be thinking about them in the context of these developments as well.
I think the interesting part of that conversation as well is the exact same thing happens on the infrastructure side, doesn't it? You know, we slow down the processes of how we actually get projects to market, and so there's sort of a lag on both fronts, right? I might just bring in this pattern book approach.
Can I just say it might be calling out for that Coordinator General type role
right.
to corral everybody, or the right authority to bring everybody in and fasten those processes up.
Yeah, no, good point. So the pattern book approach that Premier Minns was talking about and Kirsten mentioned this morning, we've got a question here from Princess Ventura who says, can the pattern book approach to delivering housing and amenities in TODs contribute to delivering housing at scale sooner? I might just throw to you, Jacqueline, on that one. You know, is that a tool that we've just been talking about? Do you think that's going to really make it quite a difference in us being able to bring these things to market quicker?
Could be. I mean, I think where we are right now is that everything's on the table, isn't it? in terms of change and trying to drive the change and get to the result quicker. I think we've got a fantastic open-minded secretary in Kirsten. I think she's open to any solution that we bring to her by way of industry and trying to sort of move that dial. I think that is a fantastic starting point. I think industry has a lot of solutions. I think the collaboration is there. Perhaps we're in the go slow phase before we get to the quick outcomes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's one of many of things which I think can be on the table to get there.
Great. Look, we're almost out of time, so quick answer, please, from each of the panel members. The government is currently sitting on the Murdoch report on West Metro. We're here at Sydney Olympic Park, where there's a station being excavated at the moment. How important is that project to us being able to achieve what we want to achieve in the housing task?
Critical, right? Yeah. I mean, I'm not really sure there's much else to say other than it's absolutely critical.
Yep.
Yeah, look, I would say on the metro projects, you know, not to end on a bad note, but we are facing a pretty tough market in terms of, you know, commercial office use and non-living oriented uses, which have been baked into some of the schemes over the past number of years. And so what I would look forward to over this next period is hopefully creating a more agile, flexible planning framework where we can meet the needs of the market at that time to enable things like value capture, value share, community outcomes that can all be provided through a mix of uses, not just, you know, effectively a straitjacket for one use that was conceptualised a number of years ago. So the metro, overstation development, integrated station development will only be successful if we can mix it up and if we can provide holistic outcomes in those precincts instead of, you know, singular uses.
I mean, I think when we're talking about big picture policy change, it's always useful to go back to an example and how it would work. And let's start thinking about testing some of these policy decisions out here, because this is a perfect opportunity with a new government with a changed agenda to be looking at how we do implement those sorts of initiatives out here. So it's a perfect opportunity to test it. Let's do it.
It's probably a bit cruel of me to ask you that question, Alex, so I won't. So
Any dollar invested in public transport is great. I think there's no question about it. But again, picking up on the topic of social license, I think it is on all of us to, like, the Premier and the senior ministers are leading from the front in regards of talking about density. But this is only sustainable if we as an industry and as a community then deliver the amenity that provides a social license. Otherwise, there will be a very fast stop, and therefore projects like these and other public transport projects are just great to show what we all can do for the community.
Yeah, it goes back to Kirsten and the minister's point: don't put up crap, doesn't it? You know, we've got to put up good, high quality things to create these transit-oriented developments that the community accepts. So, look, we are out of time. If you could please join me in thanking our panel: Simone, Beck, Jacqueline, and Alex. Thank you very much.